The film is about the discovery of a dead body in the desert of Arizona. And when we came across this man, he had a tattoo on his chest that read Dayani, Cristal. And then the film follows the investigation into who that person was and where he was from. And when we discover that, we then make a journey that goes from the place where he lived up to the point where we found him in the desert.
Dayani, Cristal. Wait, I'm going to get the actual tattoos now.
So the story is put together using, I guess, two narratives. One is pure documentary, observational documentary, where we find the body and follow the investigative process into the morgue, into the medical examiner's office, and then fly with this dead person all the way back to his family in Honduras. And the other part of the story, we travel with Gael Garcia Bernal, who essentially retraces the footsteps of this man.
Él era un esposo y un padre con niños pequeños. Se fue un 7 de junio, eso lo sabemos. Lo encontraron el 3 de agosto, 3.200 kilómetros de su casa. Tardó 58 días en llegar ahí.
We made the journey through Mexico with Gael, stopping off at the key locations or kind of nodal points of the journey. And in those locations we knew we would be meeting real migrants, and we would literally just explain to them what we were doing, why we were making the film, that we had already filmed the recovery of a dead body in Arizona, and we had that part of our story covered, and what we wanted to do was literally humanise the person we'd found, plus the many thousands of other migrants who were found dead in the desert of Arizona. And to do that, you know, would you help us? Which basically put Gael into this situation where wherever we were, be it river crossings or the top of a train or in shelters, they would basically just spend time with Gael and explain like who they were, why they were making the journey that they'd been through so far, and what they were trying to achieve in the US.
Oiga, ¿sabes si estamos cerca de Tecún? ¿Estamos cerca de Tecún ya?
Ya vamos a llegar.
¿Sí?
Estamos cerca.
¿Ustedes van para allá también?
Vamos para el norte.
¿Sí? ¿Ah, yo también?
¿Te vas también para el norte?
Sí.
No, pues ahí vamos juntos.
¿Y allá dónde?
Posiblemente entremos por el lado de Texas.
¿Y qué jale van a encontrar allá?
Yo voy a ver si puedo trabajar en jardinería. Yo trabajo entiendo de jardinería. A ver si me dan chamba.
Stopping off in shelters, which is the only place really that they're safe and can rest and recuperate and get energy for the next stage of their journey. And essentially that is the part of the story that Gael retraced, leaving the village in Honduras and going all the way up to the point in Arizona where we found the guy.
Una comida caliente, la oportunidad de respirar, descansar y recuperar fuerzas para lo que queda de viaje.
Some people stop off in Mexico City and try and earn some more money for the rest of their journey. Some people make that whole journey in 60 days. There's a huge variety of routes to make it through Mexico. And then when you eventually reach the northern border, there are then obviously several ways of crossing into the US, and we just focused on the desert crossing. And when it comes to the desert crossing, some people who have travelled before don't need guides through the desert, and they try and attempt that on their own or with friends. And then others actually pay a smuggler or coyote to guide them through the desert in the hope that they can carry enough food and water to make that journey, and then they'll be picked up by somebody in the US on the side of a road somewhere that will then take them through to bigger cities than Tucson, which is where most of our story unfolded. The sense of actually aspiring to something more than just sitting in the village where they can make very little money from agriculture. And I guess of course there's a relationship between the money that they see other people bringing home and obviously what they're able to purchase with that money in Honduras and in the US. And it, you know, it sets in that very traditional kind of aspiration for the American dream.
¿Qué voy a hacer? Así tengo que hacer para ver de lograr un objetivo. ¿Qué voy a hacer? Le avisas a mi mamá y en El Salvador que ore mucho por mí. ¿Ah? Vaya pues. Vaya y decirle que voy bien y que no se preocupe, que voy bien y ahí cualquier cosa y le llamo si quiero pisto.
So about 10,000 migrants a year get kidnapped by organised crime as they're travelling through Mexico, and very tragically and horrifically get tortured for the phone numbers of relatives in the US.
No te olvides de borrar tu número. Cuando ya termines de hablar, borras tu número. Excelente, jefe. Gracias, muy amable. Que si no, tú lo puedes ver.
We spent a lot of time in shelters and a couple of local hospitals where migrants who had travelled on the roof of the freight trains through Mexico to make the journey north had fallen from those trains and had lost limbs as a result of that. So now they're kind of in limbo in Mexico, not really able to go home yet because they're like medically not fit to go home, and obviously they can't really carry on that journey into the US, having lost a leg or an arm, in the hope of getting any work in the US.
El apellido, el pay. Oiga, esos son testigos.
Hondureños, guatemaltecos, nicaragüenses, salvadoreños, mexicanos. Aquí todos somos del mismo equipo. El equipo contrario.
One of my favourite lines in the film is when we just played football with a group of migrants in a shelter in Mexico. And after the game, Gaia was hanging out with 3 or 4 guys, and they're talking about the rest of the journey they need to make, what routes to avoid because of kidnapping, and then eventually they start speaking about having crossed the desert in Arizona. And one of the guys had a very rough time in the desert. I think he got sick from the kind of temperature range, from the freezing cold at night to the boiling hot in the day. And he just says this line about crossing the desert is not worth it for the American dream.
Es que no vale la pena tanto el disque sueño americano, arriesgando la vida por el desierto, y peor para personas que nunca lo han vivido. Esto es una moneda. La suerte de uno no es la suerte del otro.
In the course of the film, you discover that he has a wife and 3 children, parents who are still alive, and many, many friends who he grew up with in this community of about 2,000 people. And through spending time in the village, you find out that the vast majority of men and teenage boys have made that journey north. So his journey and the film is very symbolic of the journey that many thousands of migrants make from Honduras to the US. We never set out to make a film about the US-Mexico border. When we saw these images of the skulls being found in the desert of Arizona, we really thought about that as something very universal and metaphoric for economic policies that essentially lead to the deaths of people who don't take part in the decision making around those policies. And even though on the surface the film is a story of migration, for us it's a much bigger story that has kind of global resonance about generally this increase in inequality and increased division between rich and poor. And we could have made this film on the beach in southern Italy, where dead migrants wash up who have died trying to cross from, say, North Africa to southern Italy, or between Australia and Indonesia, or between Sinai and Israel. Like, this story is taking place daily around the world. Obviously there's like specific issues that affect US-Mexico specifically, but really like the patterns are the same globally.
Héroes migrantes. Al final del día, son considerados ilegales, criminales.